Dr. Pinky with Kuwento Co. And I'm here today with the lovely Jenah Maravilla, who wrote the foreword for the Kuwento Book, an anthology of Filipino stories and poems. So thank you so much for joining us, Jenah, today. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm doing well on this fine spring day.
I know. Look at this beautiful lighting in your space. You look gorgeous. Well, thank you for joining us. And you wrote our foreword for the book, and maybe you can tell our viewers today what is a foreword and what is your foreword, generally about.
So I actually had to learn this as I was making one. Thank you, Ate, for giving me the opportunity to write it. It really just welcomes the reader through what the journey of the book is. And for me and the parts of it that I was able to read at the time, I wanted to really highlight the process it takes and like how it is a village to get these stories together, with Ate Pinky being the steward of this project, of this community love project.
Yeah, it is a community project, a book of love of and for the community. You're absolutely right. And it really just, forward really sets like the tone of the book. And why did you write this particular forward? Maybe like give us the, behind the scenes or maybe inspiration for some of the parts of your forward.
Yeah, so I wrote the forward in a way that is similar to how I usually facilitate as a community organizer, and similar to how I orate as a poet, as a spoken word poet. And it's that you and I, as the reader, are going through this together because I feel that similar to the quote I had included toward the end of the forward, which is the most personal is the most universal. I want it to be something that is a co-experience rather than just me speaking to you.
Oh, I love that. And that's so intentional. When I first read your forward and you addressed the reader, that was like witty AF. Like I was like, yes, like how can I be like her? How can I write like her? And I loved it, because some forwards can be quite long and like litany, like, listing of things, and even in an introduction, as well. But I loved how concise and brief and short yours is, because it just had such a powerful punch. And I was thinking maybe a little biased because you talked a little bit about me, and I was really so honored and so privileged by what you wrote about me. And then we both have also been on a journey. We've known each other obviously for a couple years now, and I love how you brought our past, in there in the forward. So yeah. So what are some lessons that you learned in this, in either your writing process of the forward, and or maybe lessons that you learned in your own writing or those stories that you had read in the book?
So some of the lessons I've learned really had to do with taking a breath, taking a step back, because in this being the first time I've written a word and even had to like sit and look at examples of them, it felt like a little overwhelming. It felt like I had to write a certain way, sound a certain way, but then I was like, wait a minute. The whole thing about this book in particular is that it's our stories made by us. And so why would I change that kind of tone or like create a tone completely different when it's supposed to introduce that? And so that's where I pivoted from it being maybe third person to it being first person, to it being about my own journey as a Filipino American and even just a avid reader and, collector of stories.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the forward that there's a line saying that a lot of the Filipino family gatherings, you were like a bookworm, you're reading. Tell me a little bit more about little Jenah, a little bookworm Jenah.
So what was fun about writing this is that it did get me back to remembering how I was. And I would just, I don't know if you remember AR points, and I don't exactly remember what AR stands for. I think advanced reader. And so you get, yes, okay. So when I was in elementary school, you would get certain amount of points depending on the level of reading that you do. And then also it culminated toward the end of the year and you would get a prize. And so part of it was definitely, I get a pizza party or personal pizza at the end of the year. Like, that's great. And then the other part was really that I found myself genuinely enjoying stories, genuinely enjoying like vicariously living other experiences, different genres, all of that. But I did notice, like, as I got older and less voracious of a reader, it was mostly because there was a lack of representation. And so having this book in my hands, the Kuwento Co book, is really just a manifestation of all those little whispers and wishes in the back of my mind that I wish it was our stories. I wish it was like even my mom's stories growing up, right? And that they were on a page for other people to enjoy, that other people would be able to understand where we come from, who we are, and that, we're not a monolith, but we're still relatable.
Yes, I love that. Exactly. I think that's exactly what we're thinking with this book, with the Cuento book, that we aren't a monolith, but we can come collectively together, right, to write our own individual stories, our own individual poetry, to show how diverse our experiences are. You know, some kids may not be reading books at a young age, some may be and want that incentive pizza party, right? But all I know is, we don't have enough of these types of books or these type
Mhm.
of exposure, you know, in the school systems, unfortunately, at least here in the South, here in Texas. Maybe in other places there are, but I'm so glad that we could come together and people were willing to contribute and be vulnerable and to share,
Yeah.
their own personal stories. So you also mentioned that she co-authored actually a book. This is not the first book that Miss Jenah Maravilla's been in, by the way. This is why she's the forward, because she is an author of her own book.
Yeah, so I co-authored Filipinos in Houston with Christy Plazo, also known as Ate Christy, and um, it that in itself was a journey since it was really at a time when I was leaving nursing, which my parents were not in agreement with, and I had already dipped my feet into community work, and Ate Christie just, took me under her wing, and I was able to do this other community project with her where we collected so many stories through photographs of the folks who live here in Houston and around Houston, and really like created the immigration story um, of our community. And it's just been a pleasure to be a part of that and to really witness the growth and the ways in which we made a home out of Houston.
Absolutely. And when youth and people think about being a community worker or an activist or a leader or a cultural bearer, many of the times they don't think about us, right? Jenna, they don't think about people who write books, edit books, write something as amazing as this. Here it is. And no, this is part of it. This is part of being that cultural bearer. And I mean, folks may not even know what that means, right? To bear your culture and to light the way and torch the way, to be that light, that beacon for folks to know, right? Because there could be a youth or an elder sitting out there on the Costco shelves and they're like, oh my gosh, there's Filipinos in Houston, and feeling that sense of pride and feeling seen. And I mean, I'm just so happy that you did co-write this and you put all that energy and time. And I love this project. I wish I was a part of it more, but I was in school at the time as well. So and this is just the first step, in our community,
Yeah.
here. So you're right. There's so many beautiful pictures in this book, but there's not enough. I mean, the pictures tell 50 million thousand words, right? Like there's so much that's happening here, that there's stories living within these pictures that we don't
Hmm.
don't know.
Yeah, for sure. In the forward, I did mention not just the book, but also just because of the type of medium that it is, which is more photo heavy, and there being character limits for every caption, there really wasn't enough space for these more heartfelt, more detailed, more, I want to say, like, just it. I feel like you're actually sitting with an elder, for example, and hearing them speak this versus flipping through their album and not really getting as much context as you can. So that's where I love that the two of these books can really work together and tell the story of our community.
Yes, I hope we can live up to this in bonds as well, and what we're doing, of course, here in Cuento Co. So why should others, consider writing and sharing their cuentos and stories? Because you've clearly made a huge leap from being in the medical industry, right? From the little cute bookworm to the medical industry, being a nurse, and now, owning your own companies, and writing and editing. So yeah, why should others write and share their cuentos?
I think that others should write their cuentos and share their cuentos because every story is worth hearing. And in terms of the identities that I hold, being a Filipino American, 1.5 generation community organizer, like, and former nurse and everything in between, I just feel that like all of these intersection of identities need to be represented. I feel that, I mean, being in the South, being a woman of color, having to grow up in certain instances like predominantly white areas, or having to navigate higher education by yourself, all of those things, all of those stories are worth hearing or worth reading, or like uplifting and empowering the voices of those who are not usually in well-known spaces or have platforms is one of the biggest goals that I have in any of the work that I do.
Oh, that's great. Like I said, we don't necessarily grow up saying this is what we're going to do. I mean, I think both you and I, as being science students, and then now doing this, it's like, I don't say the complete opposite, because reading and writing will take you in,
Yeah.
right? Like anywhere you go. I just think specifically using this as a tool, right? As a tool, as a way to shape and carve out, our community, and to uplift, like you said, and to empower us. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing with these books, with our writings. And I'm just saying, like, I'm not going to wait for this ethnic studies curriculum to pass, here in the South. Like, we can just pick up this book and start reading about the story of our Lolo, or the story of this young person who wrote a story about their experiences going back home to the Philippines. I would love to see this become more accessible, just like this book, this Filipinos in Houston book, creating that, you gave access to the inside scoop of the South, because people don't know, like you and I have been to those conferences, right? What do they say about us in the conferences, Jenah?
They are surprised we even exist. They they ask us if we all ride horses, and then I got asked, "Oh, you guys should write a Filipinos in Houston book," and this was post production, so.
Really? Okay. We should have just like busted it out of your purse. Well, actually, here it is.
I wish I could have.
I know, right? That's okay. That's okay. And I think also, specifically, I know you said it's important, to uplift these stories and stuff. So is there any advice that you'd like to share or give to our viewers and audience, whether that's with your professional hat on, as creative, as an editor, or just as you as a person? And we'd love to help uplift anyone who is reading this and might be interested in doing the same as you have.
Ooh, that's such a great question, because I feel like a lot of people tend to be in their own heads when it comes to, trying to live their truth. And with me, what has helped me step out of my own comfort zone was having different intentions every year. And one of the biggest intentions that I had was literally the year that I had left nursing, was called Radical Vulnerability. And that was the intention for that year. And I would hope that anyone hearing this would try to step into that. And what it means to me is, with the word radical, it hinges at the root of certain situations, at the root of how you move through the world. And so to be vulnerable in spaces where maybe you're not the most comfortable doing so makes you live your authentic self in ways, or at least helps you remember to do so. And that has changed the way that I have lived ever since. And these intentions kind of add on to each other as different lessons. But specifically, radical vulnerability is what I wish to bring in different spaces. And I hope others can also practice and embody, so that they then become empowered to tell their story. Because the more you do, the more you hear back from others, and you're able to absorb their vulnerabilities and their stories. And it just creates such a deeper and more fulfilling experience in not just friendships, relationships, but also even like to acquaintances and those that you do wish to bring within your circles. So yeah.
That really touched me here when you said, because when you said radical vulnerability, those are two big like words, right?
Yeah.
We've heard these words in probably the current modern day, from a lot of sociologists, psychologists. But when you just explained it, it's really like a new way of saying, like, really just be yourself, be authentically raw yourself, even if that means getting to a place where you're uncomfortable with your own self, right? Yeah. Where like, maybe of course, when I think vulnerability, someone is in like a place where maybe they identify themselves perhaps in like a very weak moment, where it's like, I don't know if this is what I want to share with other people, right? But I also tell folks, it's up to you. It's your story, right? You can write as much or as little as you want, as long as it's something that it fulfills you and it empowers you. No one's going to write your story. No one is here to control your story, but you. So I really love what you said. Like I that's hard. It's hard to be
It's
radically
hard.
vulnerable.
It's hard. And then like to then realize that not just it's starting from within, but then also this kind of embodiment changes the space itself. So for example, there's a conversation happening maybe in a networking scenario, and then you decide to be vulnerable in that moment because yeah, you have the choice to be that. And then maybe the ice is broken and everyone starts telling about what they've been through or
Mhm.
currently are going through. And it's not just a, oh, I'm fine.
I love this. We're gonna have to do like a separate video on this concept because it's got me thinking where we always hear be yourself, be authentic, be your
Mhm.
true, and your truth will set you free, etc. Right? It's kind of like a very
Yeah.
sometimes a whitewashed version because not everyone can be their truthful, authentic self if there's other oppressive systems in place that don't allow
You're
them to.
right.
And
Mhm.
it got me thinking when you said that right now that you know what? I have been radically vulnerable in a lot of weird spaces that actually didn't really accept me. Right. Like I'm thinking about
Mhm.
some of these job interviews when I was trying to looking for a job like corporate wise,
Yeah.
looking for one and realizing when I share this part of being Filipino and being a
Mhm.
community leader or, trying to uplift my own community, I noticed that obviously it didn't get the call back. Right. Like
Mm, mhm.
I think they're like, maybe that was a little, I kept thinking also after, maybe that's a little too much. Like maybe I spoke too much about myself, but then I'm like, but I'm really proud of who I am and who I
Yeah.
serve, you
And it,
know?
it also becomes a filter. It becomes a filter so that you're not in spaces that don't accept you. You're not around people who cannot be vulnerable.
Yes, yes. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, that will be the next topic. Oh, we're gonna have to write about
I'm
that one.
excited. We're gonna start a
I'm
podcast.
I
We're
know this is pretty much one at this point. That's I mean, everyone's giving fantastic advice, but yours is definitely taking me to the deep end. Like,
oh, thank
oh my
you.
gosh, yeah. So, folks, I can't thank Jenah enough, for being here today. I hope you all had a wonderful time listening to her, as well as the other contributing authors that will be presented here. So make sure you watch their interviews as well, and don't forget to pick up a copy of the Kuwento Book, an anthology of Filipino stories and poems. So, everybody, y'all have a great day. You take care. And as Jenna would say, ingat lagi, meaning take care
Yeah.
always. Bye.
Bye.